Just a second. Get the other chat going. See if I can get in screen even. Over there. There we go. All right, guys, so I don't know if you just saw my promotional video for our events, but we have our schedules kind of lined out. The surgery is only going to put me down for a couple of days, so it's not really that disruptive anyways. Although what a circus that has been. You would never, in a place like the United States, have a surgeon ask you to find your own materials, which is wild. But we've been sourcing mesh for these hernia repairs. Pretty wild stuff. At any rate, yeah, the last couple of events, well, the first one was just a single individual, but it was amazing for her. Very gratifying to see the kind of changes and healing that take place in people. And it's not just the medicine, you know. Exposure to this place in general. I think the Incas picked the Sacred Valley as their sort of holy place for a reason, you know. And historically, they've been painted kind of as, I think, much more warlike than they really were. Because a lot of these places like Sacsayhuaman that were designated as fortresses and military compounds actually turned out to be holy places. And one of the things that I think inspired that was the Catholic Church kind of covering its rear end, you know. The Temple of the Sun was destroyed. The Temple of the Sun, there's two of them. There's one that still stands, Ollantaytambo, and then the main place of worship, I guess, the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. They knocked it down to the foundations and then built a cathedral on top of it. But at any rate, I think the reason they painted places like Sacsayhuaman as fortresses is that they killed everyone there. And they weren't soldiers. They weren't soldiers. So they were after gold, you know. Anyways, this isn't necessarily a history lesson, but I think this stuff is really important to know, you know. And while we're on the subject, I want to mention as well that the Incas worshipped gold, in a sense. That might be the wrong word to use, but they revered it, let's put it that way, as a symbol of consciousness, of life, the sweat of the sun god, Inti Raymi, which, by the way, is R-A-Y-M-I, Raymi, like ray, sun ray, which is interesting to me. But the point being, the Catholics also worship the sun, and they didn't know it. So they pursued the sweat of the sun, this crystallized star stuff, but they had no reason to guide them. And so they were like madmen, and still are. You know, I think there's a profound lesson in that the Inca knew why they revered gold, and they were peaceful, and they didn't charge money for it. They just surrounded themselves with it in order to maintain a certain sort of environment where they were always connected and reminded of the truth and divinity. So, also, something I didn't mention in the promo video that I think is really important. There is a ton of solar activity right now, and it's going to increase until 2025. And there are all sorts of reasons why that is significant. But if you're going into the high Andes to drink San Pedro, which is a medicine of the light, oftentimes, well, every time that I'm aware of, actually, shamans have described to me the nature of this medicine. They always just say it's a conversation with the light. And before I ever talked to any of them, I accidentally took a much higher dose than I meant to, and actually became a sort of photon in a sea of photons and had a conversation with this light. So it seems to me to be literally true, you know, that these medicines You can, from our point of view, from a Western point of view or a modern point of view, we have filters in our nervous system that reduce the amount of sensory input to something manageable, right? So different psychedelics deal with different spectrum. And San Pedro specifically is for connecting directly with the sun. That's why it's the medicine of the Andes, you know. Gold everywhere, San Pedro everywhere, really high up, meteor fields. You know, the Andes are so high that we actually get forest fires started from meteorites every once in a while because they hit the ground so often. And I think that's another reason, actually, that the Inca chose this place. They knew about the electromagnetic field and its relationship to light and consciousness. And I suspected this for a while, but it was confirmed in Ollantaytambo, which is the only still functioning Incan town that has never stopped functioning. It's one of the places we visit. Truly incredible place. But a shaman there showed me these stones that are supposedly hewn from meteorites. And he said they used them during ceremony to concentrate the energy of Inti. Well, meteors of different kinds, all of them do this, but different types do it in different ways. Some generate their own electromagnetic fields, some distort electromagnetic fields. But they all have the capacity to somehow interact with electromagnetic fields. And so we do have these stones for our San Pedro ceremonies for attenuating your energetic body to the macrocosmic energetic body. Yeah, I mean, tremendous place. It's an absolutely tremendous place, and we're going to be here until April, at which point we're going to Manu, where we're going to have another event, and we're super excited about that one as well because Manu is one of the most pristine and intact parts of the rainforest. The large species that are absent in a lot of the frontier towns, the border towns of the jungle, like giant anacondas and macaw and, you know, everything you can name, are still pretty abundant there. Jaguar are fairly common to see. There are 33 tribes. We'll probably have Ashaninka guests mostly. But, you know, once we get down there, I'll start interacting with the locals and we'll have some surprises, I'm sure. So that's super exciting. Let me check in with the chat and see if you guys have any questions for me. Some of it, because of the rules here on this platform, you'll have to email me about, but I can speak on things generally. Wow, we're a small group tonight. Yeah, so I don't know. Do the few of you that are here have anything to ask me about this, or shoot me an email? I don't really, you know, I was planning on talking a lot more about the things that we're going to feature, but the algorithm has me so nervous lately that I'm not really sure how to go about that exactly. I will talk, though, about Kashuru. This is a tremendously interesting and little-known Andean algae that is found in the high country lakes. It requires extremely clean water of a very specific pH, and it is loaded with protein, loaded with iron, and cytotoxins that actually inhibit the division of cancer cells. So it won't necessarily cure cancer, but it will stop it from developing and slow it and possibly even neutralize it. There needs to be more research done. This is not medical advice algorithm. But you can find studies on Kashuru, also called the caviar of the Andes. It's really cool stuff. It can be as big as like a apple, big round ball, and they are actually colonies of cyanobacteria. And so we serve that in salads and on the side with meals. We also make pancakes occasionally that are made of coca flour and lucuma flour. Lucuma is a fruit that is eaten a lot here. You can also make flour with it. But coca actually has a tremendous span of applications for different therapeutic things. If you watch my Coca Pancake video, I actually put a scrolling list of all of the alkaloids and what they do. And it's absolutely extraordinary that it has so many of these compounds in it. And then also, I think it's the highest plant in calcium, which is interesting because the alkaloids require an activator, and calcium is commonly used activator. So it's like nature knows what its entourage of alkaloids needs to be in order to maximize efficacy. It's really an incredible thing. Another, even beyond plants, minerals do this as well. And the old Hermetic belief, anybody that's read the Kybalion or studied Blavatsky or talked to an indigenous person or, even without all that, I think if you just pay attention enough to nature, you can see this if you're not indoctrinated too badly. But Shilajit, it helps with altitude sickness, and it's only found high as hell up in the Tibetan Andes. There is an integrated intelligence that is ubiquitous throughout nature. And at these events, that is one of our main objectives, is to help people to cultivate a dialogue with what I call the universal mind, to be able to see it, to read the allegories of the book of nature, to maintain a sort of hollow tube status so that you can bring down fire from heaven, to learn to neutralize dissonance patterns and to break the spells of traumas so that you can live freely and clearly and concisely and with a sense of purpose and clarity. That is really the first objective of any person's life. And in our world, we, I guess, have been sort of not only misled, but almost like round peg in a square hole kind of thing, where you're sort of scared into assuming some kind of role that may be completely inconsistent with your fundamental being. So we are at a place in human history, I believe, where a revolution is absolutely necessary, and that revolution can only come about by people becoming self-directed and connected with the holistic, universal mind kind of transcendental state. That's where it comes from, this awareness. Must first clarify, define and clarify your internal being, and align yourself with your fundamental purpose, and then align that purpose with the trajectory and the gestalt of the life force itself. So that is our objective, that is our goal, and we are good at it. If you guys have any questions, or even if it's not about the events, just about plant medicine or whatever, like I said, I don't have a bunch of time at the moment because I haven't even eaten dinner, and we are having a patron voice chat in our Discord at 8:30, so I have to have time to have a meal and then join my wonderful patrons, and you should too. If you're not a patron, consider joining. Hit the like button, share, subscribe. I guess I haven't talked much about the property. We're about 30 minutes from Pisac, which is a cool little town. We went into the bakery the other day to get a loaf of bread, and they had, I think, penis envies, cubensis in bags, like next to the croissants, like a high-end artisan bakery. That's how it is. You name it, and I've seen it in stores here. It's just a really different environment. The locals are very welcoming. In some places, indigenous groups in South America aren't always super happy to see foreigners around, to put it mildly. And that's totally understandable. I'm not criticizing them at all. I'm just saying that that's not the case here. Extremely welcoming people, especially in our pueblo. The people are very, very kind. Many of them don't speak Spanish. They only speak Quechua. So you have a month if you can learn some Quechua. Otherwise, you can't talk to the neighbors. I mean, you would think that they would know, the store owners, at least, like basic Spanish, like chicken, like pollo. But we actually went into a store when we first got here and asked for pollo, and it said on the sign outside that they sell them. But she's like, "What?" You know, she didn't know. She only spoke like not a word of Spanish. You know, which I'm all for. You know, I think it's amazing, incredible. It's really surreal here. Um, Basically, we have this little enclave of like modernized homes, and then the rest of the area is more or less traditional. They're all out in the fields all day, carrying sacks of potatoes up and down the mountains, and there's alpacas in our front yard all the time, and it really is like being in another century. And then we have rivers all around, creeks with waterfalls and trails everywhere, up into the mountains and out through the fields. So it's a super tranquil place. I feel really lucky and blessed to have been here at all. Just to know that things like this still exist. And it was really a surprise to find it just 30 minutes from Pisac, because Pisac is pretty modernized, and then to just go 30 minutes away and discover there's still entire pueblos that speak, 90% Quechua and are still just farming and, In fact, I saw some of them at 3 hours away in another town, this group saying they discovered morels and that they could sell them for a good price. And they're like, we made it out of poverty with this one. And I'm like, I don't know if that's what you really want. You guys don't, maybe they know how good they have it. But after seeing the tranquility and, the happiness, how friendly people are and just curious, the idea of please, more specifically, what do you mean by dissonance patterns? Well, there's all sorts of dissonance patterns. There's the influence of culture, where it doesn't serve you, expectations and different forms of indoctrination. It could be political, religious, it could be parental. People are kind of taught to respect their parents and that you are a morally bad person, even if your parents are terrible people. So you kind of have this pressure to sort of conform to their expectations, to some extent. So all of those things are forms of dissonance. And then also early childhood traumas and whatnot. It almost feels cliche to talk about it, but because people talk about it so much, but it's true that we've grown up, all of us, in an extremely toxic society. Leaving the United States really made that clear to me more than anything. To see how much less dangerous poor people were in other countries, for example, and how much more dignity, and like there's not really any such thing as white trash. There are poor people, but it's not like you don't have, except for in the major cities. But even, Lima is not even in the 50 most dangerous cities in the world. So, I mean, but yeah, the culture in the United States. And the thing is, too, that because it's normalized for us, we take for granted that it's okay, that that this cultural programming, what did Terrence McKenna call it? Provisional programming. That it's just normal. It's how things are supposed to be. And you don't really realize that you have these mind-forged manacles, this cultural trap that you fall and prey to until you're outside of it. You can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. So, yeah, that, and then, the trick to neutralizing the trauma, because you cannot, another thing that gets people trapped, except for the whole moral thing of honoring your parents that we're kind of culturally indoctrinated with, whether it's appropriate or not, you're also afraid, you don't want to be angry. And so a lot of people bury this stuff so that they don't have to feel the rage at their parents for the horrific things they've done to them, if that's the case. I've seen this many, many times. So the trick is that you have to learn a process, and it starts with, ono pono, forgiveness, unconditional forgiveness. And The thing is, you can't do that just based on a desire to. It has to be real in order for it to have an effect, right? Truth is self-substantiating. So it's got to be real in order to be substantial. And so the reality is you realize, okay, these negative influences from whoever, some abuser, it might be your uncle, it could be some kid that you grew up, whatever. There's an overwhelming chance that the reason that they did these things to you is because they were abused by somebody else. And so you go through this chain of lineage, that their parents and their parents and this, you know what I mean? And then you realize that the blame and the anger just kind of dissipates because it's really, you don't know whose fault it is. And it's not the person's fault. And so then you're able to like recognize all this stuff objectively without blame and without hate and anger to an extent. We're all human. I mean, I still struggle with it with, my mom and whatnot. Definitely not been perfect about it. But, there are ways. There are ways to rise above, to rise above all the dirt and grime, add the right spice at the right time. That's basically it. I mean, there's more to it, but we would need a lot more time than we have. What's happening? Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've mostly gotten through my talk about this, I guess. I mean, what's happening? Are you just saying hello, or do you not know why we're here? So anyways, February, March, maybe the first 2 weeks of April, Sacred Valley, May, in Manu, the entire month. Shoot me an email if you would like more information. All of the medicines are listed, well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And it's also not just the ceremonial medicines. I'm well-versed, taught by different indigenous tribes, mostly in Ecuador and Peru, mostly in Ecuador, though. Bobansana, Guayusa is more difficult to get here. Sangre de Drago, Dr. Sandi, all sorts of very, very powerful, cascarilla, all sorts of very powerful, uña de gato, all sorts of very, very powerful plants from the jungle. So even if you have like physical problems of different types, I have resources for that as well. So, did I mention drink a lot of colloidal gold before you come? It's an amazing thing to do because gold actually has a relationship with light that nothing else does. And it also is a superconductor that is activated by light, so it's not superconductive unless it's either at its critical temperature or there's light shining on it. And our brain is loaded with tiny particles of gold. And when you take colloidal gold, it actually builds in the brain, it stores in the brain, and it increases your cognitive capacity, your memory enhances, and this is not medical advice algorithm, although there are studies that you can look up. Mood, anything that the brain deals with, gold will help. So before a retreat like this, you don't have to consume it all the time, get a bottle of like 500 part per million, something really strong, and just take it every other day on an empty stomach before breakfast, and then you're good. It just stores in the brain, and it's brilliant thing to do. So I don't have much time before my Discord chat. I'm going to keep it short now. I just wanted to pop on and see if anybody had any questions and offer a little bit of my, I guess, MO and philosophy for those who might not be familiar. And I hope to see those of you that feel called to this sort of thing. We definitely do it a little bit different. The groups are limited to I think max we could even have here is 6 or 8 people if there's couples. So small groups so we can give everyone lots of individual attention, customize the experience, and make sure that it's exactly engineered to suit you. Can you talk about your experiences with ayahuasca telepathy? Yeah, real quick. That is something that I feel is weirdly absent from the discussion about psychedelics in general, because it's not just ayahuasca. The first time I experienced telepathy that was so certain that there was absolutely no doubt, my girlfriend at the time was a mile away up on top of a mountain, and I was going through this sort of trial, I guess, an ordeal. And she knew every single word that went through my head. She knew that I had a tear run down my eye. She knew about the Burmese mountain dog that I stopped to pet. She knew I didn't have the keys and was cold and couldn't get my clothes, and that's why she came down. I mean, there was no doubt. And we had only eaten like less than a gram of. I barely noticed them, you know. And I think the explanation is that the reducing valve in our nervous system that filters sensory input down to something manageable is taken down to various degrees and in different ways by different psychedelics. And so you're more receptive to input from other people's minds. And precognitions as well, you know, your pattern recognition is increased pretty dramatically, and that actually facilitates precognition. So I'll give you the best story, I guess, because I don't know if I have time for the whole thing. Let's see if I can do it quick. The first time I saw my partner, it was a day after the morning after an ayahuasca ceremony, and I walked into this coffee shop, and I heard the Pachamama narrator voice say, "She will have your babies," and I was like, whatever. Paid no mind to it, and then we just kept running into each other over and over and over again, and she would actually kind of follow me around. You know, I ran into her at a party, and I don't mean like follow me around like I didn't want her to, but, you know, she was there all the time, and I would try to talk to her, and she didn't seem like she wanted, it made no sense, you know. So I get on the bus with the shaman to go back to the jungle, and I'm thinking about, I didn't even know her name, I just thought the German girl, you know, that voice said she would have my babies, and the shaman looks at me and he goes, "You know, the first time I saw my partner, I thought, she will have my babies." And I didn't say this out loud, you know, so that was weird, you know, but I thought, okay, well, just random stuff comes out of people's mouths, you know, and then so we go out to the jungle, and I'm sitting on the deck, and I have my eyes closed, so I didn't know the shaman was there, and I was thinking, the German girl, I should invite her to tea, or no, yeah, tea, because it's not as, you know, intense. And I open my eyes and look over, and the shaman's sitting there, and he goes, "The German girl, invite her to tea, but by the river." And at that point, I was like, all right, dude. And this is my teacher, by the way. It's like, okay, there's no doubt. And I'd read about this, you know, as a child, the anthropological records and explorers and whatnot many of them had documented things like shamans knowing the pyramids were there and they couldn't have ever left the jungle or seen a TV. The Eiffel Tower, street corner in China, one of them, Sir Walter Raleigh, the shaman said he could know anything when he drinks the vine, and the Sir Walter Raleigh said, okay, tell me something you couldn't know, and he's like, your sister's dead, and it was true, she had died 3 days earlier. You know, there's plenty of history of this. In fact, there were experiments in 1963 or 66, right before they banned them, by Gene Masters in Houston, PhD medical doctors, where they tested telepamine and telepathine, which are the original names for Harmala and tetrahydroharmaline, I guess, or harmaline and tetrahydroharmaline. You know, so it's like it's a thing. There's a history of it. So later that night, or maybe the next day, I don't recall exactly because we were there for 3 days. I was laying on the deck and I saw a mosquito land in the middle of my forehead, and it bit me, and I realized that I really saw it land, and I was looking through my forehead. So I sat up with my eyes closed, and I was waving my hands in front of my face and looking up and down the rails and everything, trying to see if things tracked correctly. And I thought, well, the brain's pretty powerful. It could probably do that on its own. So the next morning I went downstairs, and the shaman, the first thing he says to me is, sometimes when you drink medicine, you can see through your forehead. And I was like, of course, like, do you mean would I like some breakfast or something? Like, what the hell kind of thing is that to say to somebody first thing in the morning anyways, you know? So there's two levels to that. And one of them is that the pineal gland is associated with telepathy and sixth sense type stuff. And also it is connected to the neovisual cortex and has rods and cones. So some people believe actually that when you're having visions, it's your third eye that you're looking through that it sort of activates it and peels a layer off and allows you to peel into another dimension. And my experiences support that. In fact, the final bit that I'll share, even though it's pretty gnarly, on the third day, as I was leaving the jungle, the shaman stopped me and he said, when you get home, because I had a really bad relationship with my mom and I was visiting her for the first time in 8 years, I think, after having not spoken to her for, all that time. Well, really, she wasn't speaking to me. That's what she did to people. Anyways, he had picked up on that. I hadn't told him a lot, but he picked up on everything. And so he said, when you get back to the farm, go directly to the yurt. I did not tell him I was staying in their yurt. So that was weird. I mean, expected at that point. But he said, go directly to the yurt, burn some incense, and say everything you need to say to your mom to the smoke. I didn't make it to the yurt. I got home, and she had somehow taken acid, which blew my mind. Like, I was not expecting that. Her and my stepfather were high on acid, which is not normal. And we got into a discussion, and she went into one of her, narcissist, lunatic modalities, and really started going for it, and I was exhausted from the jungle, and I think it had just started to hit me, all of the stuff that I had been through due to her influence, and I lost my temper badly. And the next time I saw her, she was in a glass box because she unalived herself. So that shaman's advice to go directly to the yurt, after all of that telepathy and whatnot, you would think that I would have thought, okay, it doesn't matter they intercepted you. But I was in a great mood. My stepfather was smiling and laughing, and and then my mom came out in just toxic, destructo mode, and it didn't end well, and then it really didn't end well. So there's some ayahuasca telepathy stories for you. I do have to go because I got to make it to my Discord meeting. It's very important. We are working together to create an arbitrage bot and other projects because we want to have an actual meaningful community that can empower the people that are involved. And so that's what's hood, and that's what's good. What do I think about determinism and eternalism? During precognitive experiences, do you think one is seeing a likely possibility or a definite future? That's a crazy question because I don't think there's a definite future. The universe, to me, seems to be composed of equal parts of antinomies, so order and chaos are balanced completely. No one can really answer that question positively, but I've often wondered, I've had a lot of accurate precognitions that there's absolute with dates and everything, but I've also had a lot of wrong ones, and I think science, one of the ways it discredits that sort of parapsychological phenomena is to say, well, you just notice the times you're right, and it's just, selective perception or, cognitive bias of some kind, and that's definitely not true when it gets so highly specific. So I think the answer, just like the answer to everything, is both. There's this old mystical saying that all of these things are true and false, and it's both true and false to say that they are true and false. And it's not mystical gobbledygook. It sounds like it is at face value, but this table here is solid, right? No, it's not. It's mostly empty space. It's true and false, and everything is true and false. So, it's order and chaos. Without chaos, there would be no possibility for evolution, for movement, you know what I mean? Another good example of that, the solvet coagula thing, the shaman or the magician, their mind breaks down almost, I've never heard of an exception. There's a period where, and it's not like normal schizophrenia. They actually have a special name for it, essential schizophrenia. And your ESP type senses go off the charts during this period. And it's a breaking down of the mind because you can think you have a rigid system, it has to loosen. Chaos has to enter in order for it to reconfigure itself and coagulate again in another form, right? So that's the sort of structural necessity for this. So I think that some precognitions are absolutely certain because there is order, but then others not so much, I don't think the variance in the system from chaos is the It's equal, but it's not exactly balanced in a sense. It's difficult to explain because I wasn't planning to explain this. So give me a second to think about it. Some of the chaos is within ordered systems, and it's very minor. So the way that it is distributed throughout the system allows it to be in balance without predominating. You know what I mean? It's brilliant. The universe was definitely engineered by a mind of an order that you guys know. You've been there before, I think. So anyways, seriously, you guys, I got to go eat dinner. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please hit the like button. Consider becoming a patron. And there are options for supporting. More specifically, what do you mean by... Oh, I already answered that. All right, guys, for real, I got to go. I might pipe on for some music later. Probably will, actually. So cheers, and I hope to see, it's only 4 to 6 people, but some of you. We always get great groups. A lot of them are repeat guests, and we always become friends and stay in contact with afterwards. So good night.